Oh, man, I tell you, that late dinner was delicious. But anyways, 1:24 in the morning, and while I was at work, okay, backtrack. I've been watching a lot of Comics Explain. A lot of Comics Explain, right? At as soon as Endgame came around, I was listening to a lot of Comics Explain. And I have been meaning to bring more reactions for Comics Explain back to the channel. Because we haven't done one since I did all the reactions to the Infinity Gauntlet issue that he made videos about. And I was beginning to think, like, what kind of video do I want to share with you guys from Comics Explain? Like, and because there's so many, good comic book videos that he has done, especially about Civil War. I mean, I don't watch Civil War so many times, but other than that, I found a video that was mainly talking about one specific person that we all want to see come to the MCU, and that man's name is Victor Von Doom. Now, for those of you who don't know who Victor Von Doom is, this is what this video is going to explain to you. If you don't know who Comics Explained is, go to his channel, watch his videos, subscribe. Because if you're trying to really immerse yourself in these comic book heroes, that's the best way to start. Especially if you don't have any money, the comic book is right there, and all you have to do is just listen to what Rob has to say, especially about X-Men. He knows some X-Men. All right. But for those of you who don't know, this certain character, this man is a dangerous motherfucker. Okay, he's a dangerous motherfucker. He ain't no slouch. He's not as smart as Reed Richards, but he ain't no damn slouch. But I'm just gonna put that to perspective. But this is about his whole life, the stories of Victor Von Doom, from Rob. Comics Explained. Let's get into it. Dr. Doom's Origins, Part 1, Cursed at Birth.
So with New York Comic Con this week, I have not had a chance to prep my normal fare of videos with regards to a history of the Marvel Universe and the character discussions and so on and so forth. And so what I wanted to do was bring you guys content while I'm away, but I thought it'd be kind of a cool idea to talk about the origin story of Dr. Doom. And the reason why is because Dr. Doom is amazing, and his origin story really matches up with how awesome he is. So the origin of Dr. Doom comes to us from writer Ed Brubaker in the form of a 6-part series called The Books of Doom. And the Books of Doom are done in a documentary-esque form, and we actually don't find out until halfway through the first issue that Doom's being interviewed. But the Books of Doom basically provide us narrative from other people that have been a part of his former life. And so it's a comic book counterpart to you quite literally sitting in front of a TV and watching an interview on a character that features snippets from different people over the course of that character's life. And so it's extremely well done, but it also ties very well into the original origin story of Dr. Doom that appeared in Fantastic Four Annual #2 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And it fills in the holes and it builds on that. And this is kind of a big deal because the origin story of Doom wasn't given until like 2 or 3 years after his first appearance. And even then, it was a pretty reasonable size origin, but it left a lot of questions in terms of his life, in terms of how he came to be who he was, so on and so forth. And so what Brubaker did is he came back and updated this with some of the modern content for Marvel Comics that had been, expanded by different writers over the course of Doom's and the Fantastic Four's histories, and he just put it in a really concise 6-part series for us. And so what this does is this picks up with Dr. Doom more or less telling us about his birth. And what he says is his intelligence basically seemed to emerge when he was still in the womb. He was developing skills that normally are not prevalent in children until they're, 3 or 4 years old. He was developing this while he was in the womb. And a lot of people would say that was never true, that perhaps it was just Doom's own imagination. But Doom tells us that in his mind, a lot of it had to do with the fact that his mother was dipping into magic, into dark magic specifically. Now, this comes to a head in the form of the fact that Dr. Doom's father tries to reason with his mother. And there's a couple reasons for this. The first is that as a Romani, Dr. Doom's family already had a stigma of delving into black magic. The issue here is that his mother was legitimately doing it, and so she was developing a bad reputation even within the Romani community itself. The other half of this was that word would reach the ears of the Baron of their territory, and if it did, he would inevitably have her killed and would probably kill off the entire tribe just to make sure nobody else got any of the same ideas.
Now, keep in mind, for those of you who don't know, the reason why the tribe that Rob explained that they were in don't really didn't really want something like that, because you gotta understand, back in those times, people were scared of magic. Period. Even if you did something that was remotely close to science, people didn't understand science back in those times. So even if you had did that, they would, be suspicious of you being a witch or conjuring up black magic and whatnot. And the fact that, Victor Von Doom's own mom was practicing that makes a lot of sense further down the line on what happens to her. So yeah, back to the video.
Problem here is that in the mind of Dr. Doom's mother, they're at the behest of this Baron. This Baron is very cruel, this Baron's very sadistic, and their idea is that because they're basically living day by day trying to stay alive, if she can amass the power necessary, she can basically free them from the yoke of oppression by killing off the Baron and his forces, allowing them to live without any issue. The problem here is that when she invokes this magic, she effectively sells her soul. Now we'll find out that she sells her soul later on, but the issue is that in response for the magic that she invoked, the price was that all the children in the village were killed. Now, Dr. Doom was spared of this fate from being killed as part of all these children, and we'll find out why later on. But the result is that because of her actions, the villagers had cast Doom's mother out of the village, and the result was that she was eventually tracked down by the Baron's men, who were looking for who it was that had killed so many of his soldiers. And when they found her, they basically killed her out in the woods. Now, her father, I guess her husband, eventually found her, but was only able to meet with her long enough to basically say goodbye. And so after this, she was buried in an unmarked grave. But the problem here was that to the minds of the villagers, her husband should have known. Doom's father should have known what was going on. Not only that, because he was the leader, this is compounded by the fact that as the leader, he should know everything that's going on. And so this presents two scenarios. Either he's a terrible leader because he didn't know, or he's a terrible leader because he did know and chose not to tell everyone. But regardless of the situation, the villagers basically vote to cast Dr. Doom's father out of the village. Now, this changes. They end up reversing their opinion. And the reason why is because as a child, Doom was still extremely intelligent, but he was also very cunning, and he was also very ruthless. And what he told the villagers was that if they cast his family out, if they kick him and his father out, that not only will he grow up to become his mother's son and invoke the same kind of magic that she did, but he'll come back to the village, he'll find them, even if they're not there, wherever they happen to be, and he will bring upon them a terror far beyond anything that his mother did. Now, these are some cold words for a kid. And maybe Doom was bluffing, maybe Doom was being serious.
No, he wasn't.
The way he turned out, it would stand to reason he was being serious, especially with what we'll see later on here. But the fact remains that because they were terrified for their lives, in the sense that they were dealing with things they didn't understand, they ultimately let Doom and his family, or Doom and his father, stay. The problem with this was that despite being part of the community, they were still outcasts. They were never looked at the same way again. And so while they never really talked about Doom's mother, it was always kind of a back thought in the mind of everyone. It was always, they're constantly on the move now because of what she did. They're constantly evading the forces of the Baron because of what she did. She's basically become sort of a taboo, to speak about within the community itself. Now, not all was bad for Doom, and in fact, he encountered a girl named Valeria, and it was actually a girl that he kind of fell in love with. I wouldn't say that for Doom it was love, just because of the fact that his intelligence and his ruthlessness and the fact that he lost his mother kind of stripped him of that concept, but it was for Doom as close as he could get to being in love. But the fact remains here that for him, Valeria sort of represented a brighter life. Valeria sort of represented the way things could be, that things could be a bit better than simply being a social outcast within the community. The downside to this is that Doom's father is summoned by the Baron, because again, the Baron doesn't know that they were the ones behind, or I guess that Doom's mother was the one behind the attack. It was simply just soldiers retaliating for her actions. And so what happens here is when Doom's father leaves, of course, Victor freaks out. He's very upset about this. Traveling to the Baron, this is really the worst case scenario in his mind, that his father's going to be killed. But when his father comes back, he immediately grabs Doom and they take off. Now, Victor is told why. What he's told is that the Baron's wife was riddled with cancer, and the Baron had looked to Doom's father, who was perceived to be one of the best doctors, in the Romani territories, as someone that could heal his wife. The problem was that because his wife was riddled with cancer, there was nothing that Victor's father could do because the cancer was so far along. And the result was that the Baron basically blamed Victor's father for his wife's death. And so what happens is Victor and his father basically go on the run to avoid the soldiers of the Baron, who are inevitably going to track them down and try to kill them, at the orders of the Baron. And so while they're hiding, while they're remaining on the run, the issue is the soldiers seem to be hunting them to the very, very end. They hunt him as far as they can. Now, eventually the soldiers stop. But the issue with this is they're so far into the mountains where it's freezing. Freezing to death is a very real possibility. Now, this doesn't really happen. Doom wakes up and finds his father's arms around him, and it seems as though his father's dead. But we actually learn he's not, that his father survived the experience. He probably has frostbite in certain places, hypothermia for sure, but Doom's father is basically taken away once he comes back to the village. He's taken away by the Baron, presumably to be killed at the Baron's request. And so what happens is that following this, Victor basically falls he basically retreats into himself. For him, his mother died because of because of invoking witchcraft. His father died because of the actions of the Baron. He's basically sort of reaching a state of mental instability. But at the same time, his mind's never been so clear. And so what he does is he basically delves into witchcraft in the same form that his mother had. But what he does is he also blends it with technology. Now again, this is just an indication of how intelligent Doom is. There was a saying, at least if I'm getting it correctly, that magic is simply a level of technology people can't understand yet. This is what Doom does. Doom basically starts blending magic and technology to create the illusion that is technologically advanced without people coming to the realization that he's invoking magic. And so he's basically tricking the eyes and the mind of almost anybody that he comes across. And because he's able to do this, because he's able to blend these two things, he presents himself to be a formidable challenger. And he basically begins leading a swath throughout the entire territory where all these different Romani camps are located, and starts killing off all of the soldiers, and eventually kills off the Baron, drives him out of there in its entirety. Now, something else that's also interesting here is that prior to the Baron's death, he had put out a bounty on Victor Von Doom. And Victor Von Doom actually comes across a scenario where a hunter finds him. And the hunter realizes that it is Victor Von Doom. And the bounty's so high that this hunter could basically live the rest of his life in comfort if he hands Doom over. And so in response, for the first time in his life, Doom actually chokes a man to death with his bare hands. Now, there's a huge difference between Doom killing people using devices and Doom killing people with his own hands. It makes things more tangible. It makes things more realistic. It really ties to Doom himself, because the death of a person isn't the result of some device that he created. It's the result of him physically choking the life out of that person. And so this moment, if there were ever a time when Doom crossed a line that he couldn't come back from, this was it. He was basically on the path to becoming Dr. Doom, to becoming ruthless, to becoming guile, to becoming cruel, but also, somewhat honorable. And so as this first issue begins to wrap up, we basically find that Victor Von Doom is tracked down by a man from the United States and receives an invitation to be educated in the United States because of his intelligence. But with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. Let me know what you guys think about this series at the moment, because I think it's actually pretty cool. I think Books of Doom is a really, really good series. But in any event, let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.
Yeah, man. That's how that all started. That's how all he had to do was just kill one person. Well, not just his technology, but his bare hands, and that did it. That that sealed his fate. That sealed it, without question. It's messed up what happened to his parents, both of them. The mother got killed by the Baron, and then the father got killed by the same person, and then he had no one. He had a somewhat love in his pre-adult life, and just got swept away because he was so concentrated on revenge and not dying and whatnot. It's crazy. It actually is crazy. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This made me, because like you never really think for these villains, especially these comic book villains, that they had a fucked up past. You never think that. You always think that they just came fucked up, and their reasoning as to why they're doing what they're doing is not justified. For Magneto, it's justified. For Victor Von Doom, it's somewhat justified. That's just plain and simple. It is justified. I would be the same way if that happened to me. I'm gonna get up out of here. This has been yours truly, Master Ryo Sakurai. I love y'all. Peace.